Hello guys, thank you very much for joining in. We're going to be starting out with this chapter from Operation Risk book. What is ERM? Okay, in level 1 we have talked about enterprise risk management. That was there in some aspect because we had done enterprise risk management plus some future trends that we see. This chapter focuses on the details of the ERM itself. What is the ERM? They will give you a brief about that. Plus, we'll also be talking about what all benefits that we see when we include ERM in our enterprise framework. Okay. Further, what are the important components of the ERM is also what we're going to be covering in this chapter. Let us start with this session. Okay. Now, if you read this first paragraph, okay, the first paragraph tries to build up on why there is a need for you to manage your risk properly. Okay, because when you're running a company or an organization, it is not only the risk related to operations or IT. There are so many other related risks like liquidity, your legal risk, reputation risk, your market risk, right? Credit risk. All of these risks impacts you as a business. Okay. Now, when you have a risk management team, okay, generally what happens is that each of the risk is basically handled differently. That means you have a market risk team which will only focus on market risk aspect. You will have a market risk head and who's going to take care of it. Okay, and all of these risks were handled independently. So the word that you have to look at is independent and isolation. Okay, so these risks were handled in isolation. That means there was no discussion, there was no communication between the different types of risk team that we had in the organization. That was first thing that was happening historically, and everybody was managing their own the risk in their own way. Okay, for example, companies traders are responsible for managing the market risk. Actuarial teams are able to responsible for managing the insurance risk. Then there is a business risk which is managed by the management team or the CEO team. Okay, so read the first paragraph. It gives you a view, or basically it builds up on the reason to manage risk, and then it will take you towards the traditional approach. Read that first paragraph. All good. Let us go towards the next paragraph where they are giving you details of what historically has been happening within the companies. Okay, they had the individual risk team. Okay, I'll just give you a view of the same in some time, but the idea over here is that you have to focus on the environment. So previously, historically, we would see that the environment was not very volatile for the business. Okay, it was very predictable. So managing of risk in isolation was okay. There was no concern as such. Okay, banks were managing it in a separate way because there was less volatile environment. Interdependencies were not creating a problem. Interdependency between the risk, there was no specific problem that we saw because the market were not volatile. Okay, treating each risk separately, ignoring that diversification was not a problem. Okay, the same point, these two are the same point. They're talking about interdependency, which tells you about the diversification part. Okay, I'll give you an example for this. And why overhedging, even though it was happening, the firm was not very much worried about it because it was not a very big cost. Okay, but that everything changed when the market started becoming very volatile, and we saw in 2007 and 8 where things happened, things went out of your hand, and as an organization you were not ready for it. Okay, so these things, if you read the first 6 lines, okay, they will give you an idea of what was traditionally happening. So within each bank, okay, you had a market risk team. Okay, you had people over here, you had a market risk head, you had a credit risk team, you had a credit risk team, entire in a credit risk head. Similarly, for operation risk, you had the entire team sitting over here, and there was an operation risk head, and the CEO was obviously over there, and each of them were reporting to the CEO, and everybody is having their own methodology. That means they had their own templates, they had their own formulas to calculate, they had their own PPT presentation style, they had their own Excel style. So the information which is going to the CEO or the head of the organization was going in bits and pieces, because when he was talking to the market risk head, he was getting only the perspective of market risk. Similarly, when he's talking to the operation risk head, he was only getting the view of the operation risk. There was no macro view, there was no consolidated view of the risk that the organization is facing. Okay, so if you read the first 7 lines, they're talking about the same. Okay, and the next part, which is basically the without a centralized risk management approach, the information that they were getting was fragmented, and hence the decision making was happening but not up to that level, okay, which was needed to manage the volatile market. So read this entire paragraph. This gives you a case that why traditional approach failed and why do we need an enterprise risk management. Read that entire paragraph. All good. So the second paragraph focuses on the traditional approach, and hence, because there was a shortcoming, we need an enterprise risk management, which helps you to give a macro view, macro understanding of what is happening with the organization, because it was integrated and centralized. Okay, so in a very simple language, you're bringing in a system or a framework which is headed by the chief risk officer. Okay, and everybody is inputting data into the ERM. Everybody is inputting data into the ERM, and primarily that data is getting utilized in terms of report, and those reports are going to the senior management and also to the CRO. Those reports are going to the senior management and the CRO. Okay, so enterprise risk management is giving you a macro view. It's an integrated approach and also it's a centralized approach. Let us read some definitions of ERM, and out of all of these, okay, primarily they have given you definitions from different aspect or different organization giving it. Now read this paragraph. Okay, they're telling you the risk part. They're giving you information related to risk. Read this definition. All good. Let us go towards the ERM benefit and cost. Okay, but before we move over here, the definition primarily gives you an idea about risk. Risk is a variable thing which basically changes. You might expect that there might be a loss of xyz amount in a particular year, but there can be a variability into it. It can increase or it can reduce. That is the risk that we are facing. Okay, and that generally, if you're able to manage that risk properly, then you are primarily bringing more profitability to the business. That essentially means your business objectives are achieved, you're increasing the firm's value, you're reducing the volatility in the earning. In a simple language, you're increasing shareholders value. Okay, so the definition is basically just to give you about the idea of risk. And if you read this paragraph, okay, they're talking about if you are implementing ERM, you're having a set of policies, procedures, standardization of things, standardization of how we are looking at risk. Okay, and that is being implemented across the organization so that you get a macro view. So read this paragraph also properly, the last paragraph over here. Perfect. Let us go to the ERM benefits and cost. Okay, ERM benefits and cost. So now this component, okay, is very important, because when we talk about the cost, okay, ERM as a system or a way of doing things, when you want to implement it in your organization, it is not going to happen immediately. Okay, it primarily means that it's going to be time consuming, it's costly in terms of you need people, Okay, you'll have to hire people. The cost of human resource will go up. Further, you will need a system in place. That cost will also go up, and the benefit that you expect from the ERM is not going to come immediately. Also, it will come after 3-4 years. Okay, so obviously we're going to be looking at what are the benefits, but when we look at the cost is highlighted over here. The last three lines, it is a costly both in terms of capital, in terms of labor. It is going to be time consuming, and it could take several years to get the benefit into a reality. And what are the benefits? They have highlighted three primary benefits that we see when we implement ERM. Okay, these three benefits are important from this chapter perspective. The first one, integration of risk organization. What does integration of risk organization means? You're looking at the entire organization's risk, and everything is getting integrated, everything is getting combined into one single platform. Okay, and it basically creates a risk profile of the organization. Okay, when you have such kind of thing, it increases your effectiveness. That means the way you're dealing with risk, it changes, and you can deal with the risk faster. It reduces your loss, right? And when you're aggregating all the risk together, that means market risk, credit risk, operation risk, giving you a centralized view. Okay, there has to be somebody who can see the entire risk of the organization, and that is where the chief risk officer comes into picture. And because he also has a representation on the board, so he is the person who is talking to the board, talking to the senior management, and explaining them what is happening at the entire organization level with respect to the risk. Okay, all of the individual teams head, that is market risk, credit risk, operation risk, everybody will report to the CRO. They will put in their data into that ERM framework. Okay, and the CRO primarily will get information with respect to the interdependencies, the relationship between various risks. Because if suppose in my organization my operation risk is increasing, does it have any impact on my liquidity? Does it have any impact on my credit risk? That information is very important. So I want everybody to read this section. It's basically the flavor of how effectiveness is brought, because we are combining all the risk together on a single platform. All good. We are moving toward the second benefit. Okay, now whenever you are going to do risk transfer, because you have ERM now, you are going to look at previously what was happening. If you go to this diagram, previously market risk team would do their hedging separately, credit risk team would do their hedging separately, operation risk would take care of their risk separately. But now, since you have an ERM framework, everything is going to be looked at the macro level. And once you're looking at macro level, you will be able to find diversification. Okay, but what does it mean? If suppose my credit risk increases, I'm just giving you an hypothetical example, credit risk increases, does it reduces my some other risk? Okay, or is there a relationship between two risk? If one risk goes down, other risk will also go down, like that. So diversification is basically when you're combining all the risk together, the total risk is lesser than that. It simply means, I'll give you an example. Suppose there are two assets, A and B. Okay, both of them are having a risk of 10 units. Okay, when I combine them into a portfolio of A and B, which is portfolio P, my risk would ideally be say 18 or 17 or 19. So the total risk that is being created by combining both the assets together is lesser than the addition of individual risk. That is where the diversification comes into picture. Now, when you're going to do that risk transfer, okay, when you're going to do that risk transfer, that means you're going to take insurance, or you're going to enter into an agreement or you're going to take hedging positions. Instead of looking at the 20 risk, because you're looking at individually, now you will only focus on the 18, which is basically the diversified risk of the organization. So that means you're only going to do the hedging for 18, and hence your cost of risk transfer would ideally come down. You will not do over hedging, you will not do over insurance. Okay, so from that perspective, it is better for the organization because it helps to reduce cost, and cost specific to the management of risk. That means hedging of risk, transferring of risk. So read this entire part. Okay, and also read this last line properly. Darshan, answering to your point, yes, sub-additivity basically means you are getting a diversification benefit. Read that first paragraph. So the first paragraph gives you a view that if there is a non-ERM framework, that means traditional framework, each team would manage their own risk. So there might be, say, for example, a particular kind of risk that the organization is facing, which team A is also looking at, and they're also doing hedging. Team B is also looking at, and they are also doing the hedging. So it leads to over hedging or over insurance or over cost of managing the business. Okay, so over hedging of risk or taking out excessive insurance coverage. That is a problem with the traditional approach. But when you bring it under the ERM framework, which is over here, okay, and mark this entire thing as star, okay, the second paragraph tells you that under ERM, these things will not happen. Because when you're looking at the entire level, okay, of the organization, going back to my example, you will try to hedge 18, okay, which is a diversified part, not 20. Okay, so your risk will get reduced and then you will do the hedging. So you will not do over hedging anytime because you're looking at the risk at the macro level. The holistic view is what you're getting. And once you have been able to identify that, you will be able to factor diversification across risk. Factor diversification across risk. Now they've given you certain pointers over here that when you look at the reports that primarily the senior risk managers or the CRO is going to look at, okay, they are talking about enterprise level description of key exposure. Now, key exposure primarily means if you're running a business, what are the key pointers which are going to impact you? Okay, suppose I'm into trading, so failed trades can be one such aspect of it. Okay, or primarily settlement that are happening, cancellation of trades are a bigger problem for me because that can be a case of a fake trade or that can be a case of fraud happening within the organization. So all of these pointers are important for me when I get this information. So what are the key exposure that the bank face? It can also be from the marketer's perspective. So suppose if I've taken positions across different product and my product is tilted towards foreign currency, okay, that my portfolio is slightly tilted towards foreign currency. So any change in INR USD will have an impact on my portfolio and also my profitability. So hence the key exposure for me was FX. So you will be able to identify what are the top 5 exposure that we face. Further, what are the total losses that I can face for each of the exposure. Okay, so we'll quantify it into a dollar amount. Policy exceptions means you must have added a limit to each of the things. For example, you have created a limit that your exposure into FX should not be more than 20% of your portfolio. If that is a limit that you have set as a part of your risk appetite statement, okay, if there is a breach or if there is an exception to that policy, suppose in 1 or 2 cases we are going about 20%, then whose approval are we going to be taking? What is the process of managing that exception? Okay, will it be approved by the CRO or will it go to the CEO of the organization? So you have to find the how you're going to manage those exceptions and whose approval it will be needed. That is one part. Further, you will also find early warning indicator. This is generally done to anticipate any major risk coming in for the business. It can be with respect to trades, it can be with respect to attrition, right? So this is basically a planning of how a certain risk is emerging and how you will be able to be prepared for it. So when you have an ERM, all of these things will be looked across a dashboard, across a system where the CRO is going to get the entire macro view. So they will be able to manage this risk in a better way. Read that paragraph, the second paragraph properly. All good. Let us move towards integration of business process, which is the third benefit that we see for ERM. Now see, this benefit focuses on that before in the previous traditional approach, everybody was working on their own silos. Silos means their own team. And there was no communication that was happening, because of which there is no efficiency in the business processes. Okay. That means If suppose a team, I'll just give you a very raw example of it. Suppose there is a team which is doing some activity. Okay, they are doing some processing and they're sending the file to B team. Okay, B team is also doing some activity. Now if suppose there is a communication between both of these teams and they are trying to understand what is the activity that each team is doing, so they can identify whether a particular activity which was initially done by B, can we do it at the start itself and give it to B. That will reduce their work time. Okay, so that will bring in more efficiency. Because there is a communication, you will be able to understand what other teams are doing and how you can change your own activity to help them and move the activity or complete the activity in a faster way. Okay, so business uh, process, this entire part, the improved business performance part, is focusing on your ability to communicate, and that is primarily happening because of ERM, because we are trying to integrate everybody, we are trying to open up a dialogue. Okay, and once that happens, you'll be able to bring in more efficiency into the business, the speed of activity of the things will improve, there'll be an efficient utilization of resources. If they've realized that there is a team member who can do certain XYZ activity, we can move that team member to a higher team which is doing that activity. For example, if that particular skill set is available with a particular team member, we can give him certain specific work like that. Similarly, capital utilization within the business, where a particular new software has to be added, they will look at which team actually needs it, because there is a communication that is happening within the organization. Okay, so efficient allocation of resources will become prominent. Okay, capital allocation will improve. Okay, further there is also product development and pricing improve. What does that mean? Whenever you want to issue a new product, okay, every other team will ideally give an approval on that product with respect to each of the activities. Suppose a new product is introduced in the market, then obviously the operations team which is doing the processing, their activity will also change slightly. The system change has to happen. Okay, so for all of these they will have to get an approval from each team, and then once the approval is completed, then only they'll be able to introduce the product into the market. Now when you're taking that decision, okay, because you have an ERM, you have the total consideration of risk available with you. You can understand, okay, if you are introducing a particular product, what is the risk increase that I see? And because of which I can change my pricing. I can slightly increase my pricing to take care of that extra risk that is being brought into my books. Okay, so you will only focus, so once you have the entire view of risk, you will only focus on taking those risks which are very profitable for you. Okay, that means you will, when you're taking decisions with respect to projects, if you would know that when companies enter into new projects, they look at the net present value of those projects, and when you're doing that, you're indirectly checking what is the benefit that we are getting and what is the risk that we are taking into. Okay, so that is being covered in the first 6 lines which I have highlighted. Kindly read that point. Right, let us go towards the next part. Now the traditional risk measures like value at risk and RAROC, okay, they're primarily being used heavily right now. RAROC is used in every organization. They try to see where when you're entering into new projects, when you're uh, putting money into a particular business, okay, at that point in time they'll try to see what is the RAROC that we are getting, risk adjusted return on capital. They will try to compare it with your hurdle rate, how much minimum that we should have got and how much returns we are getting from that particular business. Okay, so that will help you to take decisions, and not only from the business point of view, from the risk point of view. When you're entering into new products, whether this return that we are getting, is it good enough to satisfy the risk, and that risk can be your credit risk, operation risk, like that. Okay, or can we take steps to mitigate certain aspect of risk? Can we enter into derivatives? Okay, so that ultimately we are taking only those profitable risks that can add value to the shareholder, that can increase wealth of the shareholder. All of this has been highlighted over here. So ERM, if you read the last 4 lines, 5 lines, ERM framework tries to give you that opportunity to do that, in the sense because the business performance, business integration is happening, the way you're taking decisions for business will also improve, and hence the shareholder value will also improve. Read this last 4 lines of the paragraph. Right? Credit derivatives are used for hedging. That's correct. That is one way to do that hedging. So credit derivative is used primarily to manage credit risk, like CDS. But there are other derivatives which you can do. So for example, you're using a structured product to only cover the market risk of the instrument. Okay, you're entering into a total return swap because you feel that the asset value or portfolio value might go down. That's a market risk for you. So you're entering into a total return swap to reduce that risk. So there are other structured products available also. Okay, I've answered your query. Moving towards the last part. Okay, now when we look at when we talk about ERM, the main person that comes into picture is basically your chief risk officer, who is a champion. Okay, the risk champion. Okay, this is basically been added. Okay, and the same risk champions are also identified in each team. So you have when you have a greater understanding of risk, you have a chief risk officer position, okay, who knows what is happening within the organization with respect to risk. He will try to inculcate the habit of talking about risk. Okay, because then the reporting will improve, your capital allocation will improve, your compliance will improve, your regulations management will improve. So everything is interconnected. So ERM helps you to do that because you have a single source, which is a CRO, taking decision for the risk. Read this entire paragraph. Let us go towards the next section, which is a chief risk officer. Now, this section is not important from the exam perspective because they are giving you more details about what a chief risk officer should be. There is one paragraph over here which is slightly important, which I'll highlight. So if you read the first paragraph, okay, this section, they're telling you that okay, chief risk officer is responsible for the entire risk of the organization, and every other risk head is going to report to him. Okay, so it's basically repeat part of it. And role is important when you have a huge business. That means your bank is very wide, you're doing operations across different regulatory part and all of it. So read this paragraph. It is just an introductory part. Right, moving towards the next section. Okay, the CRO is a top level executive. He has a centralized role. That means he will centralize every risk with him. Now there are certain lines which are not very important. For example, the CRO, the overall leadership should be there, vision should be there, direction should be there. So all of this, he should be able to set goals in terms of risk appetite for the organization. He should be able to communicate with the entire risk team and also to the company. Okay, so all of this is being explained over here. This is pure theoretical part. That means when you look at a CRO, what all qualities he should have. Very less chances that they might test you in the exam. Read this paragraph. Further part. Moving towards the next section. Okay, this paragraph is important. Mark it as star. Okay, over here what they are trying to highlight is that when you look at a CRO of the organization, okay, he will ideally be reporting to either the CEO or the CFO. Okay, that's the direct line that he has. That means all his day-to-day operations, day-to-day reporting will happen to either a CEO or a CFO. But he will also have a dotted line, okay, to the board. That means he get an opportunity to sit in the board, and board members can ask him directly why a particular fraud has happened in the organization, why there is a risk, this risk is increasing in the organization. So he is answerable to it. Now the reason we do this, okay, primarily to reduce fraud, because if a CRO is only reporting to your CEOs or CFO, and if any fraud is happening within the organization for which either the CEO or CFO is responsible, that fraud will not come to light. Okay, that information will not go. Hence, when he's reporting to the board also, there is a good chance that he will have to answer in front of the board, and he cannot lie, basically. So he will have the opportunity to pass on that information to the board. So it is basically to mitigate risk, okay, basically to mitigate fraud that might happen. So the important point over here, how the structure is kept, or the how the hierarchy is kept. Okay, often there is a dotted line with dual relationship to both CEO, CFO, and to the board. Okay, now the reason we are doing this, okay, so that it minimizes any potential friction. Okay, and it basically helps you to understand that the roles of each of them are managed properly. There is no, suppose if CRO is only reporting to CEO, then there can be a friction that CRO wants to highlight the risk but CEO doesn't, because his remuneration, his bonus is linked to it. So because of it, there can be an issue. Okay, there can be a fraud or regulatory issues, all of this, if the CEO is taking excessive risk which will not get highlighted anywhere if there is no dotted line to the board. So read this paragraph properly, important. I am assuming everybody has been able to read the paragraph. Let us go to the next section. Okay. Now this paragraph again slightly theory, okay, but over here they are also connecting it with the audit committee. Okay, so CRO, or either the generally CRO sits in the audit committee also, who would primarily be looking at the audit points against each team and what action plans they are doing. This is done to improve governance, because if suppose there are problems which are identified by the internal audit team or some external auditors that we have got, and it is not getting passed on to the senior management, then this can lead to a bigger problem. So all of this has to be reported, and hence when CRO is sitting in those committee meetings, he will be able to ask questions. Okay, and he will be able to get the view of what is happening within the different teams. Okay, so centralization of all the risk, everything is happening. This opportunity gives you a strong risk culture and the strong oversight function. Read this paragraph. Perfect. I'm assuming everybody has been able to read that section or that paragraph. The last part is slightly theoretical. What are the qualities that a CRO should have? Leadership, power of persuasion, ability to protect the firm's asset, consulting, technical skills. Then if your CRO is very strong, then your ERM implementation will be easy. And then you will be able to get that benefit fast, because he will be able to take decisions as per the proper macro view. So he'll have great visibility, effectiveness. Yes, so read this paragraph. This paragraph is not important for the exam perspective, because it only gives you some basic theoretical idea of what CRO should ideally do, okay, or what qualities he should have. Read this section. Let me take you towards the ERM framework. So they are talking about components. That means important pieces, okay, which will help you to identify whether the ERM is working properly or not. Sorry, let's go to the important components. Okay, the first component is corporate governance. If suppose your organization, in your organization, there is no corporate governance being managed properly, there is no oversight, there is fraud happening within the organization, okay, or if suppose money is moving out of the organization, there is no checks happening, okay, people are getting hefty bonuses, there is no ethics committee, there is no whistleblower committee, okay, all of this, I'm just giving you an idea that things are not happening properly within the organization, there is no oversight, there is no supervision that is happening. So in that case, whatever ERM system, ERM framework that you're going to implement, it will not help. Why? Because the company which has been run by people, they are not proper, okay, they are creating problems. So for example, if you look at Satyam, the top management was involved into the fraud, okay, which came out primarily. Now if you have a proper risk system, if you have an ERM, it will not help because top people itself are engaging into unethical practices, okay. So if you read this part, okay, read the first 3-4 lines, which gives you a flavor that okay, if you want to run ERM properly, you need to have proper governance. That is also being pushed by the regulators. So they have talked about Turnbull report or SOX. These are basically regulatory acts which are helping you to improve governance within an organization. That is primarily to US regulations, okay. Read that 4 lines. All good. I'm assuming everybody has been able to read the first 4 lines. Let us go to the second part, or the next part of this paragraph. Okay, a successful ERM framework would require that the management and the board is equally involved into the business. They have set risk appetite and everything has been tracked. Okay, everything is managed, and the people who are heading the company, they have the skill set and they can ask questions. Okay, people who are, they're serious about ERM also, and also they're serious about the governance of the organization. People who are managing, they should have the proper managerial skill set. They should have, the organization structure has to be very clear, because in the past we have seen frauds happening where the structure was not clear. That means there is somebody who's working within the team, but there is no proper manager, okay, who's taking care of the responsibility of the people who are working for him. Okay, so that all of this is assumed that when you talk about corporate governance, all of this will be done effectively. Further, if you have an effective framework, okay, that helps you to identify all key risks properly, because ERM requires you to have identification of risk. Okay, it requires you to do quantification of risk. If you have not identified, whatever system, ERM, whatever that you have, it is not going to help you because you could not see that risk coming. Okay, so senior management and board of directors should be clear about how we're going to be looking at risk. That is going to come when you have a proper corporate governance in place, and the successful implementation of ERM framework should be done. And we should identify which team is going to run this system, who is responsible for it, which ED, which VP is responsible for it, who will report to CRO, when the reporting is going to happen, all of this. So if you read the last 3 lines, the last line primarily, they're using 3 words: oversight, audit, and monitoring. That is critical for the success of ERM. Okay, audit means whatever ERM system is throwing data or the report, there has to be an audit of that, or else the incorrect reportings are happening and nobody is able to check that. That will also be a problem. Monitoring of target. If suppose we have set in the system that if suppose my failed trade goes above 10%, there should be a trigger. So report should give you a trigger. There should be an email going on. So are we monitoring our risk properly or not? Is also covered. So read these 2 paragraphs. All good. Let me take you towards the next section, line management. Now, line management simply means when your day-to-day decision making is happening at the ground level. Okay, whatever strategy that you're creating, is it getting implemented? Okay, is it getting reflected into your pricing, in your production, in your services that you're providing to your customer? So that is basically your line management. Okay, directly related to producing a firm's product and services. Okay, it is very critical because if you're creating policies and procedure and if it is not getting implemented, okay, then the risk will be very high. The limits will not be followed, all of it, right? So line management is critical as it integrates business strategy into corporate risk policy, assessing of relevant risk, incorporating them into pricing and profitability. Now what does it mean? Pricing and profitability, or so basically when you are having a risk team and that risk team is doing the activity sitting in corporate office and looking at the different risk, and they're thinking that okay, we will implement this into our pricing, we'll increase the price slightly. Is it possible to sell that product to the customer? That obviously will come from the sales team, who's the line team, or who is actually doing the selling, who's also interacting with the customer. So how do you incorporate that situation in, or incorporate change the pricing in such a way that your risk is also included and it is also easy or possible to sell that product to the customer? Okay, so pricing and profitability, both decision has to be taken. Okay, now in order to do that, you need to understand risk properly, hence the due diligence comes into picture. So you will talk to the sales guys, you will talk to the customers, and then you will create a report, you will take the approval from the senior management, and then post the due diligence, the pricing of the risk is incorporated into the activity of line management. Now it's not only into pricing, it's also into the process. If suppose you feel that incorrect customer might join the bank, or we might open up an account for an incorrect customer, so you will set up a policy that every customer will have to give the KYC document, has to be checked, and there will be 3 levels of checking that is going to happen. So you will create that policy, but that is going to have an implementation at the branch level. Okay, the branch person who is basically opening up the account will check, there'll be somebody at the back end will check, then there'll be a sample testing by the risk management team. Likewise, you'll have to create that policy which will impact the way the organization is being run. Okay, and ultimately the idea is to address the relevant risk, so that we can manage our cost properly. Okay, cost in the sense cost of capital also, because you have to keep a certain amount of capital aside. Also the risk that we are also taking that into part. If you remember from level 1 expected loss, it is basically covered through commissions to pricing change. We are taking fees from the customer to cover that expected loss, or the loss that we feel that is going to happen in this year. Read this particular paragraph entirely. All good. Let us move to portfolio. Now, what is portfolio? Portfolio being bank's entire portfolio with respect to loans, with respect to liability, all right, where all investments have done. When you're giving loan, what all different sectors you're giving loan to. So portfolio of the product and leading to portfolio of the risk. Okay, because it gives you an aggregated risk that the bank is facing or the firm is facing. Now, they've explicitly used a word called active portfolio management, okay, of this risk, because when you're aggregating it, you'll get the diversification benefit because your risk will get reduced. But when you're actively managing it, that means there is a risk team which is taking decisions of how we can reduce our risk. Can we enter into a hedge? Can we come out of a position, because that is bringing in additional risk to us? So the risk management team will constantly take that decision. They will do active management of that risk, and also they will have prudent monitoring of risk. That means if suppose we have decided, okay, this is a risk that we want to go ahead with because this is a profitable risk, how much level of that risk should we have in our books? So you'll have limits set, you'll have monitoring being done, you'll have a team which is going to constantly do reporting. So prudent monitoring of risk as in compared to the preset limit. Limit is set by the risk management team, and there'll be monitoring happening against that limit. So you will get an entire view of the portfolio of risk that is happening. Okay, and whenever a business is taking an additional risk, how it is going to impact the overall risk, whether a risk is going above the predefined limit, that has also been tracked. So integration of risk and the financial decisions that are happening within the organization. Read this paragraph, portfolio management. Now, obviously, portfolio is portfolio of risk. Read that paragraph properly. Let us move towards the next section, which is risk transfer. Now, this is connected to a previous point where we said that over hedging, over insurance. So if you're doing the assessment of risk properly, okay, then your risk transfer will become easy because you will not be doing any uh, over hedging that has generally happened or over insurance happening. Okay, if there is a concentration of risk, that will get tracked immediately. Okay, so the concept that the paragraph primarily talks about which all risk we want to take. That's our core risk. Extra risk we will transfer. Okay, if there is a concentration of risk that is happening which is way beyond what I can manage, I will transfer it to somebody else. Okay, so concentration risk which is not critical for a business, they will transfer it and they will keep on monitoring it, how much amount of risk we are facing. Okay, we can use third party products like insurance, that you can enter into a derivative. There are hybrid products available to manage a particular risk of the organization. Okay, natural hedge. What is a natural hedge? This line, kindly mark this line, all the three lines important. Natural hedge is basically if suppose one risk is increasing, other is going down. That's an inbuilt hedge within the portfolio. You don't need to do any specific hedging within the market. Okay, so your portfolio is built in such a way that it brings in additional hedge, and that's a natural hedge. You're not taking extra positions to cover that. Okay, so that is being explained in this section, and mark this entire part as star and read this risk transfer properly. Right, let us go towards the next section, which is basically the risk analytics. Now, risk analytics simply means how exactly are we able to see a dashboard or metrics with respect to what is happening with in terms of risk. Okay, so when you have the risk analytics, which is basically talked about in the first three lines, then your decision making will be very fast, and you will be able to identify what are the cost effective way of reducing this risk, because you can see the data properly. And obviously it will not lead to over hedging, it will not lead to excessive high costly hedging. That will not be there. So you'll be able to manage your cost of risk and also your risk management. Basically the capital that you're paying or the money that you're paying to manage the risk will get reduced. Okay, so cost of managing risk in-house or externally, that decision can also be taken. Okay, that if you read this point, uh, you can consider this point from this perspective that suppose you have to do a background verification of new employees coming in, whether it makes sense for you to have your own in-house team or whether you can outsource that team to somebody else and they will manage that risk for you. That is also possible. So you have to take that decision, and that is possible only with the risk analytics. Okay, further, when we have already talked about projects being taken where the return and the risk is taken into consideration, the NPV of the project. Okay, so whenever individual business managers are they are taking decisions of entering into new projects or taking decision for the business, okay, they will be able to take that decision properly, which connects back to the NPV, positive NPV, then the economic value add. That means what is the actual value add of that project to the shareholders value, that is being that is easy for them to see and take decision. Okay, so risk analytics is important. Without risk analytics, your decision cannot happen. You will not have the dashboard, you will not have the reports, metrics available with the managers and the CRO also. Read this paragraph. Let us go towards the next section, which is basically your data, technology, and resources. If you want to manage your risk in an effective way at a centralized level, you need to have system, infrastructure, servers, right? There should also be people who can manage those systems. So your data technology, that means your system and the technology part, the server part, and also the resource. Resource explicitly means money and people who can manage technology. Okay, you need to have these two things properly so that your organization doesn't face challenge with respect to implementation of ERM or basically the storage of data, and especially in this world where information is oil. Okay, the information is a new oil basically. So you have to consider that these challenges will have impact on the ERM program also. Because if you're having a system, but that system is not running because the server backup is not there, what is the point of having that system? So companies will have to add additional resources, okay, with respect to managing those data related issues. Read this paragraph. Let us go to this part, the last part. Okay, the stakeholder management section. See, when you're running a centralized system or standardized system, okay, your different people who are interacting with your organization, it can be your employees, it can be your creditors, bankers, your government, okay, customers, everybody should have a view of what how the company is able to manage the risk. Okay, in fact rating agencies also. So you need to give that information properly, and hence having an ERM will help you to give that information properly. Okay, so they are talking about how you are passing on that information to important stakeholders and how easy it is for you to do it. When you have ERM in place, that process will become easy and you will be more transparent to your stakeholders. That will give them more confidence, and your share prices, your reputation will be very good. Okay, so that is being covered, and a firm's internal management should be transparent to stakeholders, which provide assurance that the management follows prudent risk practice. Same thing, that means the management is able to understand the risk properly and manage the business properly. It's connected. Okay, read this entire paragraph, and once you're done, give me a quick confirmation on chat. All good? Moving towards the quiz. The basis of ERM is that. The basis of ERM. I want answers from you guys. What do you think? Is it necessary to appoint CRO? Not exactly. Without CRO also we can work. It is better that you have a CRO. Risk should be managed and centralized within each business unit. No. If that is the case, what is the difference between a traditional approach? The silo approach of risk management is the optimal approach. No, they are saying traditional approach is good. Why A is the answer? Because risks are managed still within the team, but it is being centralized. The reporting is happening centralized for the senior management. The answer is A. Let us go to the second question. Jimmy Chong is a risk analyst at a mid-sized financial institution. He has recently come across an article that describes ERM. Chong does not believe this is well written. He does not believe. And he identifies four statements he thinks are incorrect. Which of the following statements identified by the Chang is actually correct? So we want to find the correct part. What do you think? One of the drawbacks of the fully centralized is overhedging. No, if it's centralized, there'll be no overhedging. So this is not the case. B part, 3 benefits: improved business performance, better risk reporting, and strong stakeholder management. Is this strong stakeholder management actually the benefit? No, it was one of the components that we just did. Is it? 3 benefits. Check the solution. read the options properly. Managing downside risk and earning volatility are optional ERM strategy. No, right? A prudent ERM, I'm going towards the last part. Prudent ERM allows the firm to accept more of the profitable risk. That is correct, right? Because we are looking at which of the following is actually correct. So answer has to be D. Which of the following statement regarding the responsibility of the CRO is least accurate? Least. Okay. CRO should provide the vision for the, this is correct, that should ideally be their opportunity. In addition to providing overall leadership for the risk, CRO should communicate the risk profile to stakeholder. Okay, this communication part we'll have to check. Although the CRO is responsible for top level risk management, he's not responsible for analytics system capabilities. Is this correct? See what the third point is saying, whatever is going to happen in the system incorrect, I'm not going to take care of it. This is not right? So this should be ideally your answer. We'll also go back to the B point. CRO has a solid line of reporting to CEO and dotted and reporting to the CEO and the board. This seems correct. Okay. Most probably the answer is C, which a lot of you guys are also stressing because he's saying he's not responsible. That is incorrect. Right. Let us go to the fourth question. What is the fourth question, guys? Okay, Luke is recently appointed as a CRO of a non-profit organization. He's looking at the ERM and they are having several discussion. During the discussion, we have to make two statements. Okay, risk analytics is a key component of ERM. That is correct, and refers to the integration of risk management to revenue generation activity. Is this risk analytics? Is this risk analytics? Then what is line management? No. So this is incorrect. The moment this goes, so this is incorrect, right? Let us go to the second part. While an organization can hedge desirable risk, it is unable to hedge undesirable risk. Is this correct? Undesirable. See, the undesirable component comes into I don't want to. It doesn't mean I cannot. So ideally this is wrong. Okay, so the answer has to be B. Okay, let us go to the next question. Alan primarily sits on the board of the organization. Richard reads the following statement. Okay, we have to identify Richard's assessment is accurate with respect to what? Okay, which of the statement is correct primarily? Statement 1, to manage undesirable risk, the institution could use third-party protection, including insurance product. Okay. Then, although third-party protection is expensive, that this is the cost of business, it is not possible to reduce this cost. Is it correct? He believes that both of these statements are incorrect. Okay, so this is a catch. So primarily, we have to find where it is incorrect, because if you read that line, they are saying that he believes that the statements are incorrect, and where his assessment is right. That means we have to look at the incorrect statement. Okay, is this incorrect? The first one, no, it is right, because we can use a third party. That means insurance like product. This is the right statement. We are looking at incorrect. If you look at the second statement, third party protection is expensive, although every time it might not be expensive. That is one point. Okay, this is the cost of the business, and it is not possible to reduce this cost. This line doesn't seem correct. Okay, so this is wrong part, and hence the answer has to be B. The statement 2 is incorrect. I hope everybody is clear on this question. Question number 5. Give me a quick confirmation. Slightly different question. Okay, so if I'm not wrong, we are done with the chapter.